I'm going to propose to you that the compass is actually a donut, which will make sense to you. And the other thing I want to say is a lot of innovation is in technology, clever little things like this. But actually, I think the biggest innovations we need to make are in here. And I'm going to talk a lot about the social innovations we need. I'm hoping there's lots of innovators in the room, because these things need innovating and changing. So, many people are now familiar with this picture. This is a Swedish product, a Swedish innovation, the concept of 9 planetary boundaries from the Stockholm Resilience Centre. The concept that to keep Earth in the Holocene, there are at least 9 critical Earth system processes that we depend upon, and we mustn't push ourselves over boundaries. And the green circle in the middle there is what they call a safe operating space for humanity. I've redrawn it there, so you've got a green circle with a safe operating space for humanity. Well, that's all very well for environmental safety, but it says absolutely nothing about social justice and the state of humanity in the world. And given that we've both got an environmental crisis and a crisis of poverty, we have to tackle them hand in hand. So just as there's an environmental ceiling over which we mustn't go because there lies unacceptable environmental degradation, so too there's a social foundation below which nobody should live. Nobody should live in that blue space in the middle where their human rights are not met. Every human being has the right to have enough resources at their command that they can meet their needs for food, for water, health, education, for jobs, income, to be resilient to shocks. All these 11 issues, these are the issues that governments around the world have highlighted going into Rio. These are the 11 social issues that the world's governments want us to tackle. So we actually have to live not in a round space of a safe operating space. We have to live in this green space which is shaped like a donut. We have to make sure that everybody has enough resources to meet their human rights, but that collectively we live within planetary boundaries. And to me that's the challenge. That is where all of our innovations have to bring us into the safe operating space and the just space between social and planetary boundaries. So for our generation of innovators, we should be innovating into that space. And I'm going to give 5 examples of innovations that I think will bring us into this space. Firstly, it should be a principle. Anybody who's innovating should be thinking, is my innovation bringing humanity between social and planetary boundaries? Whether you're inventing an iPad, a vaccine, a shower head, textiles, wind power, are you making sure you are meeting social rights? Are you paying people decent wages and looking after people in the supply chain? Are you minimising the resource use and being resource efficient in the way you're making this product? If you're making hamburgers, if you're making biofuels, if you're making patio heaters, you really need to start rethinking your products, because in many ways we know from a lot of the research around, some of these are facing real challenges both environmentally and socially. So all products need to be designed into the donut space. That's the first principle I think we should adopt. Secondly, I'm going to talk about some real areas where I think we need innovation. I would love to see people innovate women out of poverty. In many developing countries, women sweat and work all day merely to provide things that we can get at the turn of a tap and the flick of a switch. Look at these women carrying wood to do cooking, water on their heads. It is an utter waste of women's time, and it's a complete disrespect to women that they should have to spend their lives like this. And after all this work, they've earned absolutely no money. They've got no money in their pocket, they have to do the whole thing again. Women's empowerment depends on innovating products and ways of thinking that can get women out of this poverty. And some of it is technology, but actually some of it is innovating around existing powers, and I want to give you one small example from Oxfam's work. In Cambodia, where just as in every country, people love mobile phones, and Oxfam's working to empower women commune leaders in Cambodia to be more powerful members of the community and to network together. So they need to be in touch with each other. We tried giving them mobile phones, came back a few months later and said, well, my husband took the phone because he wanted to use it for business. So there's a power relationship in the household. How can you innovate to make sure women have access to mobile phones? We asked around women and they came up with the answer. Give them pink mobile phones. I see a woman here holding a pink camera. Probably no man is going to take that camera from them. Give women pink mobile phones. The men do not want pink mobile phones. See, this woman gets the joke, right? So the innovation here isn't the phone, it's the colour and the social power relationships. And there's a lot more things we could do like that. These women are now transforming how they work, and they're going far beyond what Oxfam gave them the phones for. They're checking about coming floods, they're checking about prices in the market. When there's domestic violence in one household, the women will turn up there and look after. So they're innovating with these phones. So sometimes it's a small shift up here. Another area for innovation. how can we change our lives up here? So how can we rethink what we think is a great lifestyle? Whether it's going on a walking holiday in your own country, renting a tool instead of buying it, couch surfing. So instead of staying in an expensive hotel, using the internet to find somebody in this city, we could all be staying in a couch on something, or in a spare room in somebody's home in Stockholm, and get to meet the people of Stockholm at the same time as coming here. Getting kids to ride to school together. I'm so impressed by Stockholm. It's almost getting run over by cyclists everywhere. And I live in Oxford, in a cycle-friendly city. You know, how can we get everyone to think that is the normal way to get to school? And getting communities to close the road and talk to each other again. This isn't innovation, this is actually going backwards to tradition, but we need to reinvent those traditions. And as Tim Jackson was saying yesterday, find new forms of affiliation. It's not about going out and buying more stuff, it's about meeting more neighbours and getting to feel like we belong part of the community. So all of us can take ideas away and innovate in our own minds. How am I going to change my own life? I would hate, though, to say if we leave it to the consumer. I really find it very difficult when companies and governments say we need consumers to change their choices. That is putting far too much expectation on people. We need governments to put in place regulation that will make those choices right for people and right for companies. And this is one of the biggest areas of innovation that we need in global governance. So here are climate change negotiations, been going on for 2 decades. There's Kyoto, then there was Bali, then there's Copenhagen, Durban. This is not working because we are not cutting carbon emissions in anything like the way we should be doing it. And the cheap answer, the cheap response to that is, oh, the UN doesn't work. It's not the UN, it's the countries who turn up, and it's what our negotiators turn up with in their heads, and the national self-interest that so many countries are still bringing to bear in those negotiations. So how can we as citizens innovate in the way we influence our governments, in the way we bring out the vested interests that are stopping them from taking action? How can we campaign to make governments go to negotiations like this and do what is so obviously the right thing? We urgently need innovation in getting governments to think about the global common interest and not the short-term national self-interest. And one of the reasons governments still think about the short-term national self-interest is because they're still thinking in short-term economic thinking. So my final ambitious innovation is to rethink economics. When I studied economics 20 years ago, this diagram was at the heart of it, and it still is today. It's the idea of the circular flow of money and the circular flow of goods. And it's just, you know, companies, firms provide goods and services, households provide labour, and so it goes round. And the question is, how do you make the economy grow? And this diagram gets inserted into the back of the head of every economist, whether you know it or not. And you carry it around, not aware that it's there. The problem is, it's completely wrong. First big thing it's missing is that it's not floating on a white background. The economy is utterly embedded in the environment. It draws on natural resources and it puts the pollutants into the natural environment. And we can't just call these externalities. The environment is not external. It is the very planet we stand on. So economics needs to completely rethink the way it treats the environment. Secondly, this diagram is silent about the distribution of resources between the owners of capital and the owners of labour. And given the increasing inequality within countries that's happening and the rise of the Occupy movement, that really matters. We cannot ignore income distributions. We can't take income distributions given as economics would like us to do. We really have to put social justice at the heart of how we think about economics. So I'd love to rip this diagram out of every textbook and start again, put this one here. You want to be an economist? Welcome to Economics 101. Before we start, there's a few things you should know about this planet. It has planetary boundaries. You need to know a little bit of science, just like Anders Wijkman was saying. You need to know some science. You need to understand this planet that you want to economize around. And you need to know about its inhabitants. You need to know about human beings, that they have human rights, and that requires resources to meet them. Now, you as an economist have an incredibly important job to bring humanity into the space in between. Now, if that had been my economics training, I'd be proud to be an economist. I would love to reinvent economics so that that is what economists are doing today.